Hey, folks, Dr. Osterman here, Ivan Sutter, Indianapolis Star. He's Mike Niziolek, Bloomington Herald Times. It is a gorgeous, slightly cloudy, breezy August 4th, 2025. This is Mind Your Banners for August 4th, 2025. And it is, as the title suggests, previewing Puerto Rico. Indiana, I believe, as we speak, I believe maybe airborne for San Juan. They fly down today. They come back a week from today. Mike, I will be headed down tomorrow and back a week from tomorrow. My invitation to ride on the team plane was for the 13th year in a row, lost somewhere in the mail. But I think we wanted to sort of both look back at last week when we were part of a media group that got to sit in on a 1 hour team practice, and then obviously also spin forward to what we feel like Indiana needs to accomplish, or at least maybe start to kind of lay the groundwork for in Puerto Rico this coming week. First and foremost, how are you?
I'm good. Doing good.
That's excellent. You sound good. You sound great, even, I would say.
What are you chugging? You're like
Polar Ruby Red Grapefruit Seltzer, the best, the dawn of all seltzers.
Just want to get our sponsorship read in there. You got the ad read?
Well, if they gave me one, if Polar's listening, or any other sparkling water company, frankly, for that matter, because I don't drink soda. I drink about a cup of coffee a day, and then I drink a lot of this. So can't wait to find out why it's bad for me in 10 years. Let's start with open practice. Just thoughts on open practice generally. We got to see some individual work, got to see, I think, a fair amount of drill work. Indiana, someone compared it to me to called it Signetti-esque. It seemed like Indiana accomplished a lot in a short space of time, at least in terms of moving from sort of one thing to the next. I would say there was some good and there was some bad, but I'll open the floor to you first. Just the things that you walked out of that gym that were most sort of impressed upon your mind about what you saw.
It is a pet peeve of mine, though, that like when some people get in these practice and they do these write-ups, it's like, man, they got a lot done. It's like, I've not been to a college practice that's not moved like a college practice. That's not like, it's college practice.
Yeah.
Here?
Yeah. That's a story for another day. We'll leave that.
Well, no, that should be the whole podcast. That should be the whole. Well, I don't know, but either way, by and large, these practices, they like you said, there was probably more drill work, but I mean, at this point, with these 10 extra practices, what they're trying to accomplish, I could see why that there would be. It was probably more than half, at least. And then certain things mixed in. But no, and I was going to write about this for tomorrow or Wednesday. The focus on energy. Now, it sounds kind of silly, but it's purposeful. The idea that he's telling the graduate managers, he's telling coaches that he wants them loud. He wants them to make a lot of noise. General managers were tasked with like clapping throughout almost the entire hour, with the exception of when they were in the 5-on-5 drills and things like that. They had chants for dunks. They had chants for threes. And I asked Tucker DeVries about it, and he said basically this has kind of been something that he's seen since he's gone to practice for his dad, not just been a part of the teams, and that the idea is positivity can kind of help you carry through. And if sometimes guys, if they don't get in practice, like some of the graduates or some of the people on the sidelines, that's one way to kind of contribute at least something to the team. And I just found it interesting. That it carried throughout almost the entire hour and that never really let up. And so if you're going to do that for, entire, maybe it's a little less when you're scrimmaging more or when you're scouting opponents, obviously, because you got to hear things, but just this idea that probably is part of like the baked in identity of who DeVries is and what his teams look like, that he wants that to be part of it, right? Upbeat, positive, and help with focus, kind of be plugged in. And, probably good to hear for Indiana fans what the energy on this team the last couple of years has maybe been lacking at times. And the teams look disconnected, especially with last year with all the transfers. And when you're bringing in a group of, 13 guys now, I think we're up to. That's one way, because and I did ask kind of about team building and things like that, and they were like, well, not a lot off the court, like not a lot out of the building yet. The trip will be one of them, but maybe this is one way to sort of like a shortcut to, you don't need to do that kind of stuff, where if you're building it in the moment, you're building it with practice, you're building it with workouts. You'd rather have that than sort of like, you guys go out to B-dubs or something. And I don't know. I just thought that sort of was the overarching thing. We can get to the basketball part of it, but I just thought that was something that, has been part of his programs going back years. And obviously, he's implementing it now. And I just thought it was interesting. He's talking to the team about it, talking to the managers about it. Just more than just like, look, we need energy, a more concrete sort of outline to get that done.
I think there were two things and I agree with you. I think his direct quote was, we want a loud gym. That was what he said. There were two things I took from that, or two things that struck me. That one was not just energy, but I think he also wanted pace. And he basically has said, and I think he said something like this, either like the first day he was introduced, or maybe when we sat down with him. I can't remember. It all kind of blurs together. But I think he kind of said, like, part of the reason I structure our work that way is because I want to play fast on the floor, and I'm just sort of like trying to bake into my team comfort moving quickly, comfort with, saying we don't slow down, we don't take breaks, we don't, we don't pause for a breath, we just keep going and going. And yet at the same time, the other thing that I noticed, and this was juxtaposed against how loud the gym was, how energetic things were, he was pretty calm. Like, he wasn't forcing it. Like, he was encouraging and he was teaching and he got on players here and there, but he wasn't, I guess, for lack of a better term, cheerleading. Like, he still kind of took more of that, CEO coach approach, I thought anyway, to just sort of moving between drills, observing different things, stepping in here and there when I think he felt like he needed to, like it was necessary. But he certainly wasn't going over the top with it. He was letting a lot of it be, if not organic, because as you said, I think it's kind of an edict, or a sort of like a working brief to his managers, to his players, like to his assistants. I thought it was notable for his assistants. We need you to do this. You need to provide this. But it wasn't something that felt forced, I guess, was my point. That like at least from him, he was happy to let it just sort of develop within his group. Now, maybe that was just the day. Maybe he'd tell you, if he was sat here a month ago, it wasn't that way. I had to be much more that way, and now they're just starting to pick it up. But it was noticeable to me that as much as that was an emphasis, it didn't feel like he was forcing it, like he was just sort of like trying to drive it, that it was happening somewhat organically. And I wonder if that is a reflection of something that I thought about as I watched, almost like not just watching drills or watching 5-on-5 work, but even watching guys communicate with another, watching guys talk to each other in huddles, or sort of push each other when they were doing like shooting competitions and things like that. It just kind of occurred to me that while Indiana has a very young roster in terms of time on task together, it is an old group. There are a lot of players on this team that maybe they needed to get used to a different term, or they called the drill something different, or the call for a certain ball screen coverage was different there, and they needed to learn that, but like, when you set up a shell drill, or when you set up a driving kick drill or whatever, guys did not need to be taught the basics. That a lot of this was probably going to look familiar to a lot of these players. They would just need to tweak it to, in Indiana, we call it something different, or, DeVries wants to do it slightly differently this way. And I thought that for a group that is probably still sorting through questions of leadership and, sort of like the hierarchy of different things. And I know I want to talk about that like on the floor in a little bit, and that maybe is pushing more toward thinking about specifically what we're going to see in San Juan next week or this week. But I just thought it was noticeable that, you had a whole bunch of guys on the floor that even if they're still figuring each other out, even if they're still figuring their head coach out, even if they're still figuring their program out, frankly, a lot of what they're going to be asked to do is very familiar to them. And I think that's something Indiana's got to find ways to lean into, especially in Puerto Rico, and then pushing into preseason, which ultimately they'll get back the 11th. Like their preseason will start roughly a month after that. It's going to come up fast.
Well, yeah. To your second point, I think one way he could have gone is trying to build a roster with the guys that have a lot of eligibility left, and he didn't. He went the other way. I don't remember the numbers, but someone's like probably 9 of the guys only have 1 year of eligibility left. So I mean, when you're talking about like experience level, and 2 of the guys that are probably least experienced in terms of stateside basketball weren't even there yet. So I mean, you've got a group of 11 guys, 1 true freshman, and I mean, is there even a true sophomore of the group? I mean, there's a couple guys with
and Josh Harris is, I believe. Harris, the North Florida transfer.
Is one other guy that's only had 100. So I mean, it's like, I mean, there's a lot of games played there. So to your point, yeah, I think that should be the case because I think that's what he ended up with. His transfer haul was basically all guys, with 3 years of experience, probably average around 3+ years of experience. To your second point, or your earlier point about DeVries. A couple of players I talked to do say, though, he's got a lot of energy in the gym and brings kind of a positive, upbeat mindset. And so I do wonder if maybe he was a little quieter on the day we were there. It just that would be my maybe take on that, just because of how explicit the guys were, just saying like, yeah, no, he's part of it. He kind of brings a smile and not to say that he doesn't keep them on task or calls them out, but I do think that he does sort of further that goal of trying to make it loud in there and help. But like you said, he was very quiet and very sort of, I don't know, maybe some of the things rubbed him the wrong way too. With that may be a good seg to what happened in the practice. It's the second half of the practice. He wasn't very pleased either. So maybe that's where some of that stemmed from.
Yeah. So I mean, if we're going to talk about key themes, key takeaways, I think one of them almost certainly has to be Indiana is demonstrably further ahead offensively than defensively right now. I think that's fair to say. And in some respects, that's not surprising. The pack line, even for an experienced group, like historically, I mean, Indiana fans kind of cringe when they hear the pack line. I always point out defense was never really Archie Miller's problem at Indiana. Archie ran the pack line. It takes a little while, even with an experienced group, to kind of pick up the specific nuances of how to play it without lots of breakdowns, lots of slow rotations and missed assignments and things. And also just because, Indiana built a roster full of guys that I think it's probably fair to say came with greater offensive credentials for the most part than defensive credentials. Guys that were in their previous roles going to be putting a lot of their time and effort into.
Well, specifically, we could say he loaded up on shooters. I mean,
yeah, well,
loaded up,
not for shooters, but you think about like a slasher like Tatum Connerway. Reed Bailey is a big who's I talked to a friend actually this weekend who's a Davidson alum and knows his game well. He's much more sort of offense focused, even as a big, in terms of what to do in ball screens, what to do with the ball in his hands, the feel for when to roll, when to pop, how to manage different things. The point is, there are ways in which it should not be surprising that Indiana is further ahead offensively than defensively, but it was pronounced. Offensively, guys were making shots. You could see both in drill work and in live work, really good understanding of concepts of spacing, playing off ball screens, 2-man game, 3-man game, all that stuff. And quite frankly, on defense, Indiana really struggled. And that was against a defense that was, third line players plus even, kind of some support personnel. And, listen.
Yeah, I think at one point it was maybe 1 or 2 scholarship players and 3 managers or.
Yeah, well, at least one of those managers is a graduate manager who played at Drake. So you're talking about former college players.
Yeah.
So it's not like the kid.
But it wasn't the second team. It wasn't the bench.
No, but I'm just saying it's somewhere between like your second team and the kid who moved into McNutt a month early to become a freshman student manager. Like that's kind of the gap we're talking about. But the point is there were breakdowns. There were undeniably breakdowns. And, DeVries, he was asked about, kind of the non-negotiables of defense and rebounding turnovers and rebounding. He said, like, we're doing a lot better with the turnovers right now than we are the rebounding. I think defense is going to be, for better or worse, and we'll see, where Indiana looks or how Indiana looks against a team that doesn't know its calls and its personnel as well, and maybe doesn't know its tendencies and things this week. But defense, for better or worse, I think is going to be a real talking point of the Puerto Rico trip.
What did you think? Just your perspective, because part of the defense is that interior, and we've talked about this being kind of not necessarily small physically like guard, but like small probably overall lineup in general, and then obviously small in the post. Like, how pronounced did you think that was? And do you think, as you kind of look, like where's that on your level of concern?
I mean, I think that attaches to basically where this team is with DeVries' defensive sort of like discipline come November. And the reason why is because the pack line as a defense is kind of designed to make up for some of that. Like it is designed to keep the ball out of the lane. And what sometimes happened with some of Archie Miller's teams, which obviously frustrated Indiana fans, was that led to an overemphasis on sort of interior defense that led to allowing too many three-pointers, and Indiana would get hurt from behind the three-point line. I would point out that during Archie Miller's tenure, Indiana was pretty consistently in like the 130s, 150s, 180s in opponent three-point percentage. Like basically Indiana was pretty much run-of-the-mill in defending the three. And if you look at the actual defensive numbers, Indiana was 65th or better nationally every year defensively. And the one year that they were 65th, they actually had, I think, the fourth best adjusted defensive number in Big Ten play alone. The problem was that always felt incredibly precarious because Indiana just could not score the ball. And so every time there was a breakdown on defense, it felt doubly sort of impactful because you knew Indiana was going to struggle to answer at the other end of the floor. I don't think this team is going to struggle for shooting. I don't think this team is going to struggle for scoring. They're going to have to figure out, roles and the balance of things. And again, I want to talk about that later, but I think this team, the concern I would have is really more, I mean, I guess let me preface it by saying this. We knew Indiana was going to be small. And therefore, I don't think it was ever a leap to say, this is not going to be a dominant rebounding team. This is not going to be a dominant shot blocking team. Like that is just not how it was built. Sam Alexis comes with kind of a pedigree. He was actually kind of widely seen as one of the better bigs, one of the more, sort of interesting sort of mid-major to high major transfers, particularly defensively among bigs last year. He goes to Florida. He has some injury issues. Florida winds up settling on this kind of like by committee post rotation, and he just can't break into it. I'm curious to see how his role sort of fleshes out over the course of this season. But I would contextualize my answer by saying we never expected Indiana to be very big. Like that was a conscious choice that was made in building the roster. What would concern me if I were sort of, an Indiana fan or attached to Indiana or whatever, what would concern me is if, let's say Indiana goes to Puerto Rico and looks really defensively short. And I don't mean like height-wise. I mean short of where it needs to be. And then we get to maybe, the exhibition games in late October and Indiana's still there. Because that's when I think that the whole point of the pack line is the system can – not the whole point, but one of the fundamental strengths of the pack line is the system can compensate for individual shortcomings in different spots, whether it's size or it's, lateral quickness or whatever. But it's a difficult system to pick up. I remember someone telling me when Archie came in that Tony Bennett needed like I think it was like 3 years at Virginia to feel like his team really had it down. Indiana obviously has a more experienced team, so maybe you can flatten that curve a little bit. But this group's got a long way to go defensively. And if you don't have that player that can just bail you out at the rim by contesting tons of shots and just swallowing up a lot of rebounds, a high volume of rebounds, a la Trace Jackson-Davis, Kalel Ware, Omar Ballo, then the system has to work, if that makes sense. And that is why that was maybe a glaring sort of takeaway from last week's practice, that Indiana's still got a lot of ground to make up there.
Yeah, and we could talk, we mentioned lineups. It was interesting that they just had a clearly, to me, starting five just right off the bat. And then, kind of stuck with that, I think pretty much throughout when they were doing 5-on-5 drills, kind of built around. Do you have it written down? I don't want to get it wrong.
It was Connor Enright, Tatum Connerway, basically 1 through 5 in order. If we're looking at it sort of positionally, I think you would probably argue Connerway is the one. Like, I think he's going to have the ball in his hands more, but he and Enright are kind of the 1-2. Enright can also handle the ball. Wilkerson the 3, DeVries the 4, Reed Bailey the 5. And then I think your next 3 after that were going to be Sam Alexis, probably in this order, roughly speaking. Sam Alexis, Josiah Miles, and Trent Sisley. And, of course, that's with 2 guys out. Nick Dorn, it sounds like, is probably going to be out for a few weeks. DeVries kind of talked about him maybe being back for like the fall. He was in street clothes. He was not dressed out at all. Jason Drake wasn't in practice gear, but rode an exercise bike off to one side. He's probably Indiana's kind of third ball handler, point guard type player. Indiana, or DeVries rather, forgive me, he didn't really give us much on Drake at all, but he at least didn't classify him with Nick Dorn and saying we're probably not going to see him till the fall. So you would get the sense that between the fact that he didn't say that and the fact that Drake was at least dressed out for practice on Wednesday, he's probably closer. And I wouldn't be shocked if, he and Dorn certainly both are, if not competing to start, then in that first group right after. But for the moment, it's Enright, Connerway, Wilkerson, DeVries, Bailey. And then I think the next 3 after that are, just depending on matchups and needs, are Alexis, Miles, and Sisley.
Yeah, and Sisley, you wrote about it in terms of like looking the part, not looking out of place at practice as a true freshman. Thought that stood out. Obviously, did you get to watch him as a junior?
I only really, I saw, to be honest, I saw a couple of his games like live streamed. But I liked him in high school. Obviously, he was a Big Ten caliber player. But, especially with guys that are going to have to play those tweener spots where you have to kind of master a few different skills kind of all at once. And you also need to grow into your body. I thought it was encouraging both how physically ready he looked and also how just sort of like unbothered by the competitive level he was in the work that we saw. Real quick, just to answer Derby's question, the games will not be live streamed. They will not be broadcast. There will be no live availability for any of these games, even on the IU Radio Network, just so people are aware.
You were in the middle of your sentence.
No, I finished up my Sisley thought, and then I threw in Derby there at the end. Sorry.
Yes. So that was encouraging because, he's an interesting sort of bench piece, and obviously, like you said, can do a bunch of different stuff. Tucker DeVries looked healthy, and I wrote about that for tomorrow and talked with him about that. It's still sort of unclear to me, and he was very and his dad has been very light on the details about these shoulders injuries in terms of like, because it's been written about that like was always right shoulder, but he said he's had shoulder injuries in both his shoulders going back not 2 years but 3 years. That he's missed both the last 2 off seasons, and this is his first off season in a weight room since after his second year at Drake. But either way, it's been a minute. And so he feels much better about that, having a full off season, especially because the last 2 years at those previous spots were also very significant rebuilds. And he said he felt like, I think the start of his season basically was like the international trip, and kind of felt thrown into the fire. Whereas this time he's had a big run up. He was cleared right at the start of activities at the start of June, and he looks healthy. And because I think when you talk about in terms of ceiling, obviously West Virginia did a great job making up for his absence last year, but you're essentially built. He's the guy here, right? He's going to average probably over 35 minutes a game. He's going to be their leading scorer. So seeing him, having him feel good and sort of try to put these shoulder injuries behind him, I think is a huge deal because he's essentially been dealing with them for almost 2.5 years.
I think this is where I want to talk about something, and I was going to write about this probably tomorrow for Wednesday when Indiana plays its first game down in Puerto Rico. And I talked to Tucker DeVries about this. That's something we're going to have to get used to specifying that a lot this year, I would imagine. And I also talked to Lamar Wilkerson about this. And basically what I said was, you have a lot of players that, and I think this can be both a good and a bad thing. You have a lot of players with a lot of time on task that, of course, have not played well together, or they're not played together. We don't know how well they've played together. We've seen 1 hour practice, but they have not played a long time together. But you do have in this group a lot of guys who know what it means to be an alpha for your team. That was the term that Wilkerson used, to be an alpha, to be somebody who knows I gotta take a lot of the offensive load. I can't be shy about hunting shots. I've got to have the ball in my hands a lot. I've got to be prepared. I've got to be prepared to just shoulder, some of the most responsibility on the team, essentially. And obviously, a number of those roles are going to change now that you're pulling a lot of those players together under one roof. They don't all need to take 16 shots a game. But I think one of the things that I was trying to discern a little bit in watching practice, and one of the things I will very much be looking at in Puerto Rico, is what does that sort of division of responsibility look like? Someone asked me in a mailbag earlier in the summer who I think will be Indiana's leading scorer, and I said Tucker DeVries, largely because he's been the leading scorer on his father's teams, pretty consistently when healthy for a while now. But it could be Lamar Wilkerson. You could even talk me into somebody like Reed Bailey in depending on the situation.
Come on, stop it.
You got to slow down with the over judgments on a player who was like 18-8 last year at Davidson. Like I need you to pump the brakes.
If Lamar Wilkerson, I mean, we could bet right. Like, there's not a world in which Lamar Wilkerson or Tucker DeVries isn't outscoring Reed Bailey at the end of the season. Not every game.
I would be surprised. I'm just
there's no way that he's going to lead the team in scoring. Just zero chance. Like zero.
All right. Okay.
Zero chance.
I think there's like a 0.8% chance.
So
not a 0.00.
And you're saying that's your third option.
Well, that rounds up to 1%.
And it's a 0.8% chance.
You love arguing like deep semantics and then acting like you're not the only person that thinks that they're completely semantic. Anyway, let's keep going. The point is just this division of responsibility. When you have a lot of guys that instinct and their years in college basketball will tell them in the heat of a moment, will say, I need to be the one to go get the shot. I need to be the one to make the big play or whatever. They don't have to be that now, but they got to figure out what the food chain essentially is, because especially if this team is going to be a work in progress defensively for a while, they really can't afford stretches where everybody kind of goes their own way on offense.
Puparazzi, Reed Bailey actually has probably a larger percent of leading the team in scoring than Purdue has of making this college football playoff. I will say that.
I didn't see that, but
No, he said Purdue as a football has a 2% chance.
Oh, I see. We'll throw that
I said
up.
Reed Bailey. I don't think it's 2%. First of all, second of all, Reed Bailey has a probably better chance of leading Indiana in scoring than Purdue does of making the CFP.
Everyone asked me about Taste of Bloomington. I was not at Taste of Bloomington. I was at a wedding. So, but the pictures look nuts. The picture, like, I don't know if you saw pictures of Kirkwood. Like, Kirkwood was Taste of Bloomington is like a bunch of restaurants set up like outdoor stands, and they hand out, small sizes. That it went away for a few years and it came back this year. Kirkwood was like wall to wall with people. It was really cool.
It's exciting.
You take it from there.
Where was about the food? I was not at Taste of Bloomington either.
About me coughing and me needing you to talk. me needing you to vamp on the Alphas answer. See, there you go.
On the what? Now you're coughing again. You gotta get it out.
Alphas.
We're in this black background. I feel like we're in the void. We need to do something. What happened to our background? Was it?
This is the podcast first, right?
I know, but like I can see you right now, and these fans are watching us. I mean, these readers are watching us too.
I mean, okay. Well, anyway, Alphas, back to you.
No, I think that I'm less worried about that just because I think it sorts itself out, like you said, and I don't think it's as not. Look, there's a kind of a clear pecking order, like, and especially when you kind of come in and have guys where you kind of have, I think, a clear sense of what the starting lineup's going to look like. There's not a lot of uncertainty. You give guys roles right away and have them sort of work on it. So I don't think that'll be a problem. Like you said, in crunch time isn't an issue, but I mean, you're probably dealing with a coach with a strong sense of the X's and O's part of it. And from everybody, Lamar Wilkerson was one guy too that mentioned just how much he sort of kind of respects Darian DeVries' knowledge, and he's already taught him like a bunch of different things about getting open shots and looks. And so I think when you have that respect level that they're going to, not go rogue, maybe like we saw last year at times in crunch time, or not execute.
Forgot about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, like they can't do much worse than they did last year here. Right.
This is kind of an aside, and it's not like a comment on this team, but I'm just curious, like, for your thoughts in general. Do you think like revenue sharing and all that makes some of that easier? That like it's that when there's just sort of less pressure to like be like everybody wants to go to the next level, right? But when there's maybe you feel less sort of like pressure to like maximize every ounce of your career because you probably feel like you're maximizing some of it right now. Do you think like it's easier for guys to sort of like give a little up? Does that make sense? Like that
maybe, but I think it presents its own challenges. Like, and this is like you said, not about this team, but the idea that all these players or most of them are making more than everybody on the staff except DeVries.
Yeah.
So
and you have to manage like, this guy's making this much in the locker room and this guy's making this much. But right. I just wonder especially if you're going from like a mid-major to a high major, and so you're probably seeing a decent, jump in compensation anyway. If it's a little bit easier to say, hey, like I'm being treated fairly here. If my coach says maybe I do 7 fewer minutes than what I had a year ago, I'm okay with that. You know what I'm saying?
No, yeah, I do. But I don't, because I mean, you see the benches leave teams no matter what anyway, because they want to play and leave money on the table to get those, but go back. You see kind of players going, well, I want to take my shot, and then they don't play at all, and they're like, well, I'd rather play basketball and make a little less money. Yeah, I think there's pluses and minuses, and it's hard to get a sense of where to go for this team. Last year, it just never felt like, guys came here for a larger payday and just didn't seem to sort of necessarily buy in at times. But, we'll see what happens this year. I mean, he's got them obviously going kind of in the right direction. They seem to be all saying the right things in terms of like, I think the guys get that they're going to have to make some sacrifices, that the minutes aren't going to be all there for all of these guys that were, there for most of them last year.
Puerto Rico, then, I mean, listen, like there's a lot of stuff that is, I think, easy to identify that what Indiana can get out of this. But I am just curious for your thoughts especially.
Well, let's start wait. So you've done this. You covered the last foreign tour, right? Or foreign tour in a sense, NCAA.
Yeah, I've been to the last two: Montreal in 14 and Bahamas in 21.
You hear the players say, "Well, it's great for bonding," and yeah. But is there a real basketball? Like, did it translate to, like, you're talking about like things you observe, or what, like, did that? And I don't know what the level of competitions were on those trips, but did it make a difference, or was it important, or is it just like a bonding trip? Because I think that's sort of, especially for this team, what's important about it. But in a basketball sense, other than because you get the practices leading up and you get the 10 extra practices, that has a lot of value. Do these games itself, especially against competition, you don't necessarily know, like the Puerto Rican university team, like God knows like what the level of talent.
I mean, you could have seen some of the teams that are playing in Montreal. Like they actually lost a game in Montreal, and then they had that team come play them in an exhibition game the next year before they won the Big Ten title in 2016.
That's what I'm saying. Did that does that sort of dictate? Is it the competition level, or like what can you learn anything basically from basketball on these trips as somebody who has covered two of them?
I think so. And listen, I mean, I covered the previous two were two like very different teams. The 2014 team, or it was 14-15. That team, the previous season had been really disappointing. There had been a lot of roster churn the previous 2 years because they'd won the Big Ten title 2 years earlier and then like lost more than half their roster. Then they had a really disappointing season and lost more than half their roster off that team. And it was very young, and they just needed to get started with that group as early as they could. Then there was also the obviously the Woodson team, which I think you understood why that was important. That was a first-year head coach. They had taken a fair number of transfers, a fair number of new players, from that group as well. That was first year for Xavier Johnson, first year for DeMar Bates, obviously the first year for Mike Woodson. So I think without being able to say empirically, because I couldn't sit here and say, well, Indiana was here on, July 3rd, and then they were here on November 3rd, and then here on March 3rd. I think you could see value in it for each of those two. And I do think the one area, especially with an older group, a group that knows how to like maybe learn a little better, that doesn't need to be handheld through this is how you respond to a defeat, or this is how you respond to a victory, or whatever. I think the biggest value in basketball for a foreign tour is just that you have film, of yourself against an unknown opponent that also doesn't know you. When you go back to talking about maybe some of the stuff that looked good or bad for Indiana in practice that we saw, well, the reality is there's a level of familiarity that is going to affect what that looks like. In terms of maybe you call something and that scout team is going to know how to react to it because they know your calls and they know, how they tweak it for this player, that player, whatever. Well, this is as one of my old high school football coaches used to say, live bullets against a team that doesn't know you, and they can scout you, and they can, they are going to play one team twice, BC Mega, which is the same Serbian team they played in 21 in the Bahamas. I think they basically just have a residency in the Caribbean in the summer, and they just like, they just seriously, I think they just come over and just hop from island to island and play American teams. But, you're going to have film that is much more authentic that you can use through all of preseason, that you can draw back on through all of preseason. There's not that permanent unknown of what are we like against, unknown opposition. What will it look like when it's not all the familiarity of personnel and the setting and everything, but it's us against a team that doesn't know us and that we don't know. That's what I think really matters, especially for a group like this, where you don't, that 2014 team literally just needed to put guys on the floor. We knew Rob Johnson and James Blackman Jr. were going to have to play a lot as freshmen. We knew Yogi Ferrell was, for all intents and purposes, going to have to be, something like a de facto team captain as a junior. This team won't have issues with experience, but it will, I think, benefit from having like genuine time on task that it can spend studying in the coming weeks of this is what we look like for better or for worse, with, you know, when we're playing a team that is unknown to us before tip off. Does that make sense?
How competitive was this team that they're facing this year in 2021?
I'm struggling to remember, and I could go find the box scores, but I want to say they beat them more soundly the first time than the second.
So it was the same deal where they played them twice?
Yeah, they only played 2 games in the Bahamas. They played them one day, and then there was an off day, and then they played them again. I want to say the second game was more competitive, and Indiana was a little shorter. They held a couple people out of that game. I think Miller Kopp rolled his ankle in that game and had to come out. That was the team that had Nikola Jovic on it, who wound up getting drafted in the first round, I think, the next summer. And he did not make that much of an impression, but you never know. Again, what's he trying to do? What are they trying to do? And listen, I think about that foreign tour in 2021. I mean, I came away from that thinking Tamar Bates was going to be a heck of a player for Indiana, and it just never quite worked out for him. Now he turned out to be a really, really good player for Missouri, but it just never quite worked out for him at Indiana. I think you never want to overreact too much, but it really does just kind of. I think that the big thing for a group that is going to have the knowledge of how to make use of it is to have film to draw back on throughout the preseason, the formal preseason, not the off season, but the formal preseason that will start in September, to be able to say, here's the good, here's the bad, here's where we've got to improve.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It's interesting to me just because the competition is so up, so varied. Like how much do they get it? And like you said, you mentioned the film. That sort of obviously is a very straightforward way to get a lot out of it. And like we said, I think the team bonding part of it. They've done Tucker. They said he's gone on 3 in a row because it was last year they went on Drake as well. So this has kind of been obviously everyone's hoping that doesn't happen next year because that means you have to leave. But Darian DeVries, but he's used these last 3 years and used them well. So I mean, he's obviously had success with that blueprint in the offseason.
All right. Do we want to put our money where our mouth is? Derby says here, can you guess which guys will be in the top 3 of each of these categories? And then we'll see who got closest to the end of the season.
I think we do that as a preseason.
All right. Yeah. We'll hold off on that. Let us tell you, Derby. Let us at least digest these Puerto Rico games, and we'll put together some predictions if you want. Wow, nice rock. Says, have they released any sort of itinerary for the trip? Obviously the games, but have they said what other activities the team will be participating in? No. And in terms of other activities, they have not. And beyond what they put on social media, I don't think you'll see anything. I don't think they're going to publicize that. They play Wednesday, that's August 6th, against Universidad de Bayamón. They play Saturday, August 9th, against Mega Superbet. We called them BC Mega 4 years ago. I don't know why they're Mega Superbet now, but both of those games, the game Wednesday and the game Saturday, are at 7 p.m. And then a Monday morning at 11 a.m., they will play Mega Superbet again. And then my understanding is they will just get on the plane after that game and fly home Monday night. Tickets are available for all 3 games. There will be, again, no broadcast of any kind, no radio, no television. I think there will be some highlights that will be released as the thing goes on. But I don't think you're going to see itineraries for a whole lot else, quite frankly. And Hooperazzi, is there a casino nearby? I think we're just going to leave that one where it is for now.
Nothing wrong with a casino.
I'm sure. Well, I think it's more complaints about previous trips, so we're just going to leave that.
For you being going to the casino.
Yes, I spend so much time at casinos. It's like my second home. Any other business from you?
Football poll got released today. What'd you think?
Yeah, 17th seems about right.
They were 19th, but that's okay.
No, I thought they were 17th.
19th.
Okay, that's weird. Because I had Hold on a second. Yeah, no, they were. I was confused. They were 17 and 21. That's where I got 17th from.
Flashbacks. Uh-oh.
Yeah, well, I wrote about that. I wrote about that at the start of camp that, like, listen, like, I don't think they're going to do it, but that is an uncomfortable reality Indiana's kind of got to manage here football-wise, that the last time there was this much expectation, things really did not go well. But, yeah, no, I don't know. Seemed about right. Maybe a little low, but I can understand why there's still a bit of a prove-it factor. I kind of get that. Yeah. That's all I got.
Top 20. I mean, when you say top 20, it seems reasonable. When you look at a couple of teams that are ahead of them, it's like, eh. But like you said, I mean, given their history and some of the brands that just jump in automatically, LSU is just given all the faith in the world and things like that, and Florida, but a little low. But I don't think that ultimately in the grand scheme, it's not as insulting as if they were left off. You'd shown me a ranking where the top 32 teams were ranked and Indiana wasn't on it. That's an insult. But no, just pointing it out that it was released. And I guess AP, I had asked you this earlier, AP's released next week.
Okay. I mean, put it this way. If from 19th, if Indiana starts 5-0, which I don't think is an absolute imperative to make the playoff, but to be in that conversation, I think 5-0 would be really, really helpful. From 19th, a 5-0 start would have Indiana probably in around the top 10. They won't be fighting.
It'll include a win over against a team that's ranked in the top 15.
Yeah, they won't be fighting for that attention the way they were through the first half of last season. Where I don't think they're not ranked until week 7. So, they won't be. I
mean, in theory, they've got two. I mean, if you win Illinois and Oregon, you're right outside the top 5.
Yeah. I mean, that was pretty quick though. Like you just handed them a win at.
No, but I was saying, like you said, like that they didn't. They had a fight for recognition and they had a fight to say like, oh, this win makes us for real. This win makes us for real. They're not going to have to do like they beat Illinois, they beat Iowa, and people aren't going to ask that question. I mean, Oregon, if they go and lay a bet, get beat down, maybe it comes up again. But I think that they have the games earlier in the schedule where you won't have to sort of hesitate about putting them among those teams as people did last year.
No, I don't think so. We'll leave it there for now. I mean, there's not this was always meant to be a slightly more basketball-centric podcast. We will be back. Do you want to try and do one for the end of the week? And I can quiz you on your thoughts on football developments while I'm in Puerto Rico?
I mean, we could, but it's like I said, we can't see it. It's going to be, you could just describe do a play-by-play after the fact of the game.
Well, a little bit of Puerto Rico, and then a little bit of get your thoughts on where things are with football, because we didn't really talk that much about it today.
What stops you from broadcasting the game yourself?
Charlie Duffy. Imagine the numbers, though. I mean, that would be,
live stream it.
Yeah, we would. I mean, someone asked about my itinerary for Puerto Rico. I don't really have one other than the games and possibly finding somewhere to watch the Charity Shield on Sunday. But one thing, just to give people an idea, there will be a lot of video content, IndyStar.com. Also, the YouTube channel where I post all these. I'll be trying to keep that very updated. I think the hope is to try and have some sort of live blog type sort of setup during the games to give people just kind of like really regular updates during the games themselves. Sort of watch this space, because I'm not sure exactly what the mechanics of that are, but that's kind of the hope, I think, at this point. So we will have a way for you to kind of follow, just with like, typed out updates, text updates, so to speak, ideally. But that's all still kind of in the finalizing stages. So any other business at all? Because I gotta go pack, man. Like I gotta,
You've been packing for 3 hours. You should be done by now.
I've been writing for 3 hours. I'm still not done with one of my 2 stories.
And you're not even done with the story?
No, I already filed one story on Andrea Simovic, the Bosnian center, who will not be on
a 0.1% chance of leading the team in scoring, right?
Well, he will not be on the tour, so I would say it's probably lower than that. It sounds like
we're talking about the season, not in San
Juan. But he's already missed so much time anyway. It sounds like he's aiming to be in the States sometime later this month. And there will be a story up on him at IndyStar.com/sports. If it's not up already, it'll be up by the morning. But I think we'll leave it there for now. Yeah. Anything else from you? All right. Well, then, for the Indianapolis Star, for the Bloomington Herald Times, I'm Zach Osterman. He's Mike Niziolek. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much for listening.